just like sort of like talk about my background so you know where I'm coming from?
Sure.
Yeah, so basically I grew up like very Catholic and also like very conservative. So I really like took all these Republican arguments for granted. But after majoring in biology at university, I sort of grew out of Catholicism and sort of gradually came out of right wing propaganda, I guess. And I've sort of rewinded the clock and started to become more and more left wing, thanks to people like you, atheist YouTubers. And there's this one argument that I really can't get my head around, which is the abortion debate. So, having a background in biology, I genuinely can't debunk the conservative argument that essentially you're literally killing a baby. So I don't know what liberals argue, except it's the woman's body. But I quite frankly deny that claim because as a freaking even if it's a zygote, like genetically speaking, is literally completely different from the woman's body.
Hmm.
So I'm really struggling to find an argument that satisfies my needs to justify abortion. So I just want to know your view, I guess.
Well, my view, I guess what it's usually called is evictionism. Like I'm an evictionist, and it simply boils down to nobody has the right to use another person's body. That's
Right.
essentially and I think it's really the only argument you need. It's not perfect. There is a rebuttal to it that I think is kind of strong. That makes me look a little bit hypocritical, but I don't. When people try to say it's not a human, it's a tumor, it's a parasite. I absolutely hate shit like that. I think not only is it just like very morally questionable, but I think it's just also literally stupid because
Completely
if
agree.
if an under if an underformed thing isn't a human, then why the hell are people with disabilities human? There is no argument you can make that one is and the other is not, except based on fifis. So I actually just when people do that, I just like, no, I'm not listening to anything you have to say, and
But
you
like,
don't need that argument either. So
what do you mean
that's
by
go
like
ahead.
using like another person's body? I don't quite get that.
The most common example that's usually used is it's a imaginary story. The world's greatest violinist is going to die unless we like surgically attach them to somebody else because like he needs their blood or something like that. So is that morally permissible? Nobody thinks really that the answer is yes.
But wouldn't that analogy only work if it's literally like gonna kill the mother? Because I
No.
mean, that situation and being pregnant, I think it's like fundamentally different because, like, unless the woman was raped, essentially, if she, like, for example, wasn't using a condom or something and that's how she got pregnant, like, in a sense, she is sort of responsible for being pregnant. Whereas in your
So I don't really
analogy,
agree with that either because you can like if you consent to having sex, then you consent to getting pregnant. No, because you can't choose to get pregnant. And if you're going to say, like, well, you knew what the risks involved were, so now you have to own up to them. I also think that's stupid. I'm just like, if that's what we're going with, then why would an insurance company ever pay out a claim ever? I don't think people actually think that that's a fair assessment.
oh, that's
But
actually right, right.
so the other thing that ties with the nobody has the right to use another person's body thing is the um argument that abortion is healthcare. So nobody is ever like you're never being pregnant is a health risk. It carries with it, and even in the modern world, if the risk is very low, it's still literally a health risk. And there's a risk of death even that goes along with it. And in absolutely no other circumstance in this country do we tell people you must be put in a place of uh, of severe health risk to yourself. The only
Right.
exception to that would be like the draft, but I'm against the draft, so I don't have to. It's not really a hypocritical stance, I suppose, for me. So,
Well, there's also like arguments from Republicans that, are like Democrats. They agree to abort the baby like literally before it's born, like so like up until like the very end of the pregnancy. Like, so where would that line be? Because those lines are like incredibly arbitrary.
well, what most pro-choice people, in fact, the vast majority of them, I think the person would have to be an abject psychopath or somebody that just like actually legitimately hates children, um,
Mm.
to make the argument that if you are at 39 weeks and your water just broke, but you say to yourself at that moment, you know what, I changed my mind, that you should be able to get an abortion. Nobody thinks that way except for lunatics, right? The
Right.
allowance for abortions up to term or whatever are it's just for incredibly rare circumstances
When like the
where
mother's gonna die.
yes, where the
Like,
mother's going to die. And these things like they happen. There was a woman in Texas, it was either earlier this year or last year, I don't remember, where she actually died because she was in a very late term pregnancy, and I don't remember what the specific complication was, but she wasn't allowed to get an abortion, and there are even doctors that are scared to like deliver the baby premature if they think the odds are really really high that the baby's going to die because they think they'll be, you know, uh, jailed for that or punished for that in some way, So, um, I did ramble myself out of my original stream of thought there. So,
my original question was like, what would that arbitrary line
oh,
be? And
right. So, for most people, it's whether or not the fetus can feel pain. Republicans try to do these heartbeat bills, which are like, that's like 6 or 8 weeks,
Mhm.
Me personally, like I describe myself as pro-choice, but that doesn't mean that I think that if you have like again, you're 39 weeks pregnant and the baby's completely healthy, you should be able to get an abortion just because you want to. No, I absolutely do not think that that would be morally permissible. The vast majority of pro-choice people would say the exact same thing. What I do think is that in the if we just want to use like a I don't know, like a ballpark framework or whatever. In the first trimester, I don't care for whatever reason. Yes, convenience included. I don't have any problem with a woman seeking an abortion because, for all we can tell, there's no experience that the fetus can have of any kind of suffering. And after that point, then it becomes these where it's going to have to involve, they're going to be rare circumstances and they're going to have to be um, extreme circumstances, I
Mhm.
guess. Like, for example, life of the mother, or if they find out that the fetus is going to have some sort of congenital problem where it's going to suffer horrendously for maybe a few hours or maybe a year or whatever
Yeah,
after
sure.
birth, then I think it's morally permissible. I also I draw a distinction between morally permissible and like what is good or right. You know,
Right.
like when people they say, I think there's this very stupid and unthoughtful argument. Abortion is the intentional killing of an innocent life, and therefore
Yeah.
it's always wrong. And I
Mhm.
can agree with the first premise, but that's just not even I nobody I can't imagine anybody would think that's true. And the one time I ever like had a formal debate on this issue with somebody, that's one of the things I led off with. I gave them an example. You know, if you were rock climbing and you often when you rock climb, you're tethered to somebody. If the person below you starts like they start having like a seizure or something, and then their body just goes completely limp, and you know that you're going to get pulled off the mountain unless you cut the rope. Is it morally permissible for you to take this innocent life? I think the answer is yes. But I don't necessarily think that what you did is like a good thing. I think it's a morally permissible thing, and it involves taking an innocent life.
Yeah, because like that's the thing. Because like when I listen to liberals talk about abortion, it's almost like they don't even classify the thing they're aborting as life. So that sort of like repelled me a lot. But like hearing people like you, I mean, I'm starting to get it like more and more, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, that's all I've got. So thank you for enlightening me, I
Yeah.
guess.
You want to hear
Yeah,
another? You want to hear another crazy example?
yeah,
There are some um there are some people that effectively still live in the Stone Age, like in Papua New Guinea and the Amazon. And these people have been studied, and what they find is in certain of these groups, they're completely nomadic. Where they Papua New Guinea is one of the most hostile places in the world to live. It's got some of the most mountainous terrain in the world. It's a rainforest, which you'd think, oh, it's all abundance. No, it's actually like it's very difficult to find good water and good food, and to avoid things that aren't going to kill you or whatever. So
right,
they actually live nomadic. They have to travel constantly. They can't set up permanent encampments really. So what
right,
happens in these societies is when women give birth to twins, they essentially have to decide to engage in infanticide with one of them because they just know that they can't carry both of them and keep up with the group and have any chance of living. So it's very weird because it mirrors the rock climbing analogy I gave. Because what the woman's gonna end up doing is killing one innocent life to preserve the other one, right? Which it's
wow,
really funny because when I had this conversation with that person, they agreed that that rock climbing incident is a morally permissible thing you can do, but they absolutely would not agree with the infanticide. And I kept saying to them, but it's the exact same thing. You're killing one to save the life of the other, and he couldn't make himself accept that it is morally acceptable
but
to
the
do that.
emotional aspect that is like a baby. So that's probably why that person can't actually justify that part, even though it's like exactly the same thing. Like
Yeah.
literally, it's and yeah, and I think that's why a lot of conservatives think that as well. Like, like literally in retrospect, all I could think of when I thought of like abortion was literally the baby. And you know, there's a lot of like brainwashing going on because they don't really tell us like the whole story, like especially in a church, because fuck. But yeah, like the focus is completely on the baby, and it's completely emotional. I think the argument. So
The infanticide one, yeah, it's
yeah.
just
Mhm.
that's a tough one to swallow. It's like would you smother an infant because it's crying and you're in a group of people hiding from the Nazis, It's like, well, Jesus Christ. It's like the trolley problem but so much worse.
That's a really interesting real life scenario. So,
Right.
anyways, thank you.
You're
Yeah, I mean,
welcome.
I've watched like a lot of your videos since I've started like my transition from right wing to left wing, and it's helped a lot. Like because like I got repelled by a lot of left wing media because of my preconceived biases. But you know, since I'm an atheist, it's sort of like it was like really gradual because of people like you. So I mean, yeah, thank you. I guess.
You're welcome.
Yeah, cheers.
How much water would you have to drink to die? Which mathematician was the leader of an extreme religious cult that forbade its members from talking or eating beans? How did an episode of Friends create one of the most widely believed medical myths? The answers to these questions and hundreds more can be found in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description.